Have you ever felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke on you placing someone in your path? Someone whose presence shook your soul to its core, only to then make it impossible for them to stay. You didn't ask for it. You weren't looking. And yet, they arrived out of nowhere, as if carried on a wind that whispered secrets you didn't know you had longed to hear. They looked at you, and in their eyes, you saw something unsettlingly familiar. A reflection, not of your face, but of your essence. It wasn't about appearance. It wasn't about charm. It was something deeper, something ancient, something that bypassed logic entirely. A connection that didn't make sense but felt inevitable. And then, before you could make sense of it, they were gone. They remained just out of reach. Like a dream you keep waking up from too soon. You were left with the undeniable ache of something real that couldn't become something lasting. And in the silence that followed, a question began to form inside you. Was this meeting an accident? Or was it written into the threads of your life long before you knew what love even was? Carl Jung called this synchronicity, a concept that suggests certain events are not mere coincidences, but meaningful patterns aligned by deeper, unconscious realities. It's the idea that two lives can collide in perfect timing, not because fate is kind, but because something within each of them needed the other to awaken. Like puzzle pieces from different corners of the universe snapping together for a brief, electric moment, not to complete the picture, but to show you that such a picture even exists. Think about it. Why is it that we can meet 100 people and feel nothing? And then one day, someone walks in and it's like time slows down. Why does your chest tighten when they speak? Why do their thoughts seem to echo your own? Why do you feel seen by them in a way that no one else has ever made you feel before? These aren't random flukes. These are spiritual collisions, encounters designed not by chance, but by necessity. You didn't just meet them, you remembered them. Somehow, deep in your unconscious, their presence stirred a recognition as if they carried a part of your story that had been left unread until now. As if they were a missing chapter from a book you hadn't yet finished, but always felt existed. That familiarity doesn't come from this life alone. It comes from somewhere deeper, older, more sacred. And yet, the cruel paradox remains. How can something that feels so destined, so aligned, so pure, be so impossible? Why would the universe show you that kind of beauty, only to say, you can't have it? It's a question that haunts people for years, sometimes lifetimes. But maybe the question isn't why it ended. Maybe the real question is what it began inside you. Because sometimes, the universe doesn't bring people together so they can stay. It brings them together so something within you can awaken, so you can remember who you were before the world asked you to forget. That person may not be here to walk the full journey with you, but they may have been the spark that lit the path. Still, it lingers. Why does the soul recognize another so deeply, only to have to walk away? Could it be that we are wired, at some level, to seek out the souls that stir what is dormant inside us? Could it be that these impossible loves are not mistakes, but initiations? That in meeting them, we begin a process of unraveling the lies we've told ourselves, the roles we've played, the masks we've worn just to feel safe. The moment you met them, something shifted. Perhaps it was a smaller glance that lingered too long, a conversation that seemed to skip the surface and dive straight into depth. Or perhaps it was sudden, a connection that hit like lightning, leaving you dazed, confused, irrevocably changed. Either way, you felt it. A soul tug, a knowing, a sense that something important had just begun, even if you didn't understand it yet. It's easy to dismiss these encounters as illusions, easy to say it was just timing, chemistry, projection, but deep down, you know better. There was something about them that cracked open a space inside you that had long been locked. Something about them that awakened a version of you that you didn't even know was waiting. The ache, then, isn't just about losing them. It's about the self that was beginning to emerge through them, the part of you that felt more alive, more real, more seen than ever before. So what do you do with that? When the story doesn't get to be written the way your heart hoped it would, when the person who felt like home turns out to be just a stop along the way, maybe you don't try to forget them. Maybe you don't try to erase what was never meant to last. Maybe, instead, you let it live inside you, not as a wound, but as a seed, a reminder that something in you is still capable of feeling that deeply, of connecting that fully, of recognizing a soul through the noise of the world. And maybe that recognition is the point. Maybe their role was not to stay, but to awaken, not to build a life with you, but to show you what parts of yourself are still waiting to be claimed. Because synchronicity doesn't ask whether the timing is convenient. It doesn't ask whether you're ready. It moves according to the rhythm of the soul, and when the soul is ready to grow, the universe sends someone not to complete you, but to catalyze you. So if you've ever felt this, if someone walked into your life and everything changed, even though they couldn't stay, know that you are not alone. And if this resonates with you, if it echoes something you've lived through, take a moment and share your voice. Leave a comment that simply says, "I know this feeling," because chances are, you're not the only one walking through the invisible ache of a love that was never meant to last, but was always meant to mean something. Let's begin this journey together. One memory, one awakening, one truth at a time. Some connections are not meant to stay. They are meant to strike, to ignite, to awaken. There are loves that do not unfold gently, like a slow-burning candle warming the corners of a quiet room. There are loves that arrive like wildfires devouring, luminous, unstoppable. They don't come to comfort you. They come to shake you. They come to burn through everything you thought was enough, everything you built to feel safe. These are not the loves that give you peace. They are the ones that break your silence. We often assume that love, when true, should be lasting, that the mark of authenticity is permanence, that the depth of a connection is measured by the years it stretches across. But the soul does not measure in time. It measures in transformation. And sometimes, the most real love of your life may be the one that doesn't last at all. Because not all loves are built to stay. Some are built to awaken, to reintroduce you to the parts of yourself you forgot you had, to light the corners of your inner world you left in darkness for far too long. Think of love as fire. There is the kind that warms the home and cooks the meals, the kind that stays predictable, contained. And then there is the kind that scorches the earth, that sets the sky ablaze, that refuses to be tamed. That kind of fire does not come to nourish you, it comes to change you, to reduce everything false to ash, so something truer can emerge. When you meet someone and everything within you lights up, it's not necessarily because they are your forever. It's because their energy, their presence, their frequency matches something inside of you that was dormant. And that spark, the ignition, is what matters most. Carl Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. That's not poetry. That's alchemy. Alchemy is the ancient art of transformation. In spiritual terms, it refers to the soul's journey through stages of disintegration and reintegration. It is not about adding more to become whole. It is about stripping away what is not real, until only truth remains. And what better catalyst for that kind of transformation than love? When you fall for someone deeply, irrationally, powerfully, it's not just your heart reacting. It's your soul recognizing a vessel through which it can evolve. The pain, the longing, the confusion, these are not byproducts of failure. They are signs that something essential is taking place within you. You are being pulled out of the person you were into, the person you are meant to become. There's a story I once heard. Perhaps it was true. Perhaps it was myth. But it's one I've never forgotten. A man and a woman met in a cafe in Prague. Both travelers, both running from different kinds of pain. He had just lost his father. She had just ended a long, quiet relationship that had died slowly, without ever truly living. They spoke for hours the first night, and again, the next, and then every day after, for 31 days. They existed in a world apart, no labels, no promises, just presence. He told her things he had never told anyone. She read her poetry aloud to him for the first time. He taught her to let go. She taught him to feel again. But they knew, even in the middle of it, that it couldn't last. He had to return home. She had already booked a flight to a different continent. Neither asked the other to stay. Neither begged for a rewrite of reality. But on their last morning, as they watched the sunrise bleed over the river, he whispered, "You will be the ache I carry when I forget who I am." And years later, they didn't speak, didn't write, didn't find each other again. But both were irrevocably altered. She became a writer, he became a therapist. Both said that something in that brief meeting cracked them open and set them on their true path. They did not stay, but they woke each other up. That is the kind of love we are speaking of here. The kind that doesn't offer comfort, but clarity. The kind that doesn't hold you, but frees you. So often, we look back on such connections with regret. We blame timing. We blame fate. We blame ourselves. We tell the story of how it didn't work, how it slipped through our fingers. But that perspective misses the miracle. The point was never to keep them. The point was to remember yourself. Because the soul does not crave possession, it craves movement, awakening, evolution. You didn't love the wrong person. You loved the right person for your transformation. And that is not a failure. That is sacred. Let yourself shift the narrative. Instead of mourning what could have been, to begin to explore what was what they activated in you, what they revealed, what they cracked open. That's where the gold is. That's the alchemy. And no one can take that from you. What if the person you cannot forget is not meant to return, but meant to live inside you in a new form as inspiration, as direction, as proof that your heart can feel that deeply? What if, instead of waiting for them to come back, you start becoming the version of yourself they awakened? This is the fire you were meant to carry forward, not the fantasy of a future that never came, but the truth of who you became because of them. Let them be the echo that guides you, not the shadow that haunts you. Sometimes, the greatest loves are not the ones that end in happily ever after. Sometimes, they are the ones that begin your real story, the story of how you came alive. If you've ever had a connection like this, one that lit something inside you, only to vanish, just as suddenly, I invite you to share it. Say, I know this kind of fire, not so we can dwell in loss, but so we can honor the spark that changed us. Because that fire wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to awaken you. And now, your soul knows what it means to burn and to rise. Love, when it strikes the soul rather than the surface, doesn't arrive quietly. It doesn't whisper. It roars. And the awakening it brings is rarely gentle. When you fall for someone who triggers something deep within you, what follows is not just longing or desire, it's a storm, a visceral, rough, destabilizing unraveling of everything you thought you knew about yourself. Jealousy rises like a tide. Fear claws its way into your chest. You feel seen and yet terrified, exposed in ways that no one else has ever managed to reach. Suddenly, you're no longer the version of yourself that walked calmly through life. You become sensitive to every moment, every word, every silence. You overanalyze. You question your worth. You wonder why their absence hurts more than the end of things that once lasted for years. Why this fleeting connection cuts deeper than relationships built on routine. The truth is, when the soul is stirred, it brings everything to the surface, the unhealed wounds, the buried insecurities, the shadows you've kept hidden even from yourself. That's not a flaw of the connection. That's its purpose. This isn't a love story. This is a transformation story. And transformation always begins with destruction. Imagine your heart as a house. Over the years, you've built it carefully, wall by wall, room by room. You've decorated it with stories, habits, identities. You've kept the windows shut tight, convinced that stillness equals safety. And then, one day, a storm arrives. They arrive, and with them, the winds howl, the roof trembles, the walls crack. You resist. You try to hold it together. But eventually, the structure collapses under the weight of the awakening. You think this is the end, but in truth, it's the beginning. The storm didn't come to ruin you. It came to remove everything that wasn't really you to begin with. It came to clear the debris of who you pretended to be, so that light could enter the places you were too afraid to illuminate. The pain you feel, jealousy, fear, longing is not about them. It's about what they activate inside you. They become the mirror, the reflection, the catalyst. And this is where Carl Jung's concept of the shadow becomes unavoidable. The shadow is the part of you that lives in darkness not because it is evil, but because it has been rejected. The shadow contains everything you deny in yourself: your vulnerability, your rage, your neediness, your capacity for deep love, your fear of being unlovable. And when you meet someone who pulls these emotions to the surface, they aren't harming you. They're revealing you. They are the mirror, but the reflection is yours. You don't miss them as much as you miss the version of yourself that was awakened in their presence, the one who felt more alive, more raw, more real, the one who cried without shame, who longed without pretending, who loved without armor. That's what this kind of love does. It breaks down your defenses. It tears away the coping mechanisms. It exposes the soft, trembling soul beneath all the layers. And when you see yourself like that, unfiltered, unprotected, it's both terrifying and sacred. Because for a moment, you were no longer surviving. You were living fully, painfully, completely. This is why heartbreak after a soul connection feels like madness. It's not just emotional pain, it's existential. It's spiritual. You are not mourning the loss of a person. You are mourning the collision with a version of yourself that had been buried for too long. You begin to ask the hard questions. Who am I without them? Why did this hurt so deeply? Why did it matter so much? And slowly, if you're willing to sit in the storm instead of running from it, you begin to see. You were never really losing them. You were meeting yourself, not the curated version, not the functional adult, but the real one, the one with the ancient ache, the wild heart, the untamed longings. It was never about them completing you. It was about them revealing you. And that is the paradox of the soul's evolution. To become whole, you must first be shattered. To find peace, you must first walk through the storm. To truly love, you must first know what it feels like to be completely unmasked. This is what it means to love, not just with your heart, but with your soul. It's not romantic. It's not tidy. It's not what movies tell you to expect. It is chaotic, purifying, alchemical. It is the tearing away of illusion, the burning of pretense, the surrender to something far greater than control. When you look back, when the tears have dried and the silence becomes less sharp, you might finally see what really happened. You didn't lose them. You lost the false self you were clinging to. And in the ashes of that loss, you found a mirror. Not of them, of you. They were the flame. You were the kindling. And now, you burn with your own light. So when you think of them, when their name still stirs something in you, remember this: they were not the destination. They were the awakening. And you are not the same. You don't need to chase closure. You don't need to understand everything. All you need to know is this: you didn't break because you were weak. You broke because something more honest was trying to emerge. And through the wreckage, through the storm, through the ache, you met someone you had forgotten. Yourself. That's the truth Jung hinted at. The person who triggers your shadow isn't your enemy. They are your teacher, your reflection, your path. So when you whisper their name in the quiet moments, let it not be a cry of loss. Let it be a thank you for showing you the storm, for tearing down the house, for pointing you toward the light. You didn't lose them. You met yourself for the first time in the mirror of their eyes. Pain is not a punishment. It is a scalpel in the hands of the soul sharp. Precise, intentional. And though it cuts deep, it does so not to destroy, but to reveal, to extract, to awaken. There is a kind of hurt that feels endless, a hollow ache that settles into the chest and refuses to leave. You wake with it. You sleep with it. You breathe through it as though every inhale is an act of survival. And in that space, it's easy to believe something has gone terribly wrong, that the universe is cruel, that you've failed. That love should not lead to this. But what if the pain you feel is not a sign of failure, but of transformation? Carl Jung often spoke of necessary suffering, of how the path to individuation, the process of becoming one's truest, fullest self requires confrontation with what we've hidden, denied, or feared. That confrontation rarely feels beautiful. It feels like collapse. But the collapse is sacred. Think of pain not as a closing, but as a passage, a door. When someone enters your life and stirs something profound, they don't always stay. In fact, they often leave precisely because their presence was never meant to be a constant. It was meant to open you, to disrupt your equilibrium, to begin a sacred unraveling. There's a particular moment, after the loss, that feels like standing before a door you can never open again. The connection is severed. The words go unsaid. The future you once imagined flickers out, and yet you've already stepped through something. You are not the same. This is what rites of passage feel like. They aren't always rituals with candles and prayers. Sometimes, they are quiet mornings filled with tears, silent car rides haunted by memory, unsent messages typed and deleted. These are the sacred thresholds of the human soul, not glamorous, but vital. Every major transformation has its pain. The caterpillar doesn't become the butterfly through inspiration. It does so through disintegration. Inside the cocoon, its body dissolves into something unrecognizable before it becomes new. And so do we. You may feel as if you're losing your sense of identity, like the version of you that existed with them is slowly dissolving. And you're right. That identity is dying, because the person you were before this connection was not yet whole. They were still living in the house that needed to be torn down. And now, in the ruins, something more authentic can emerge. This is the painful paradox of soul work. Growth rarely announces itself with comfort. It breaks in. It burns away. It asks everything of you, but only because it knows what waits on the other side. The person who came into your life and shook your world, they may not have stayed, but they left something behind. An open door, a passage into a deeper self, into your own becoming. Not everyone is meant to walk with you. Some people are only meant to lead you to the threshold. They come with a key. They turn the lock. They open the door. And once it's open, their part is done. That doesn't make them any less significant. In fact, it might make them sacred, because not everyone who stays is important. And not everyone who leaves is a loss. Some people are messengers. They carry with them the language of your next chapter. They speak to the part of you you've never dared to explore. And when their task is complete, they go not because they didn't care, but because their mission was never to remain. It was to awaken. So often, we confuse permanence with meaning. We assume that if someone mattered, they would have stayed. But the universe doesn't operate on our human timeline. It sends what we need, not what we want. And sometimes, what we need is a collision, a disruption, a single spark that sets everything inside us on fire so that we might finally feel what's real. You might be in the middle of that fire now, still trembling from the loss, still wondering what it all meant, still aching from the absence. If you are, pause here and breathe. This pain is not pointless. This grief is not wasted. It is doing something. It is carving space inside you, space for something more aligned, something more true, something only you can carry forward. And if you are in that deepest valley, if your chest is heavy and your spirit weary, let yourself be seen. Say it aloud. I am in it. I am hurting. Because no one should have to walk through this alone. If you are in the hardest part of your story, leave your mark. Say, I am here. Because someone else may be quietly walking beside you in their own darkness, waiting for a sign that they are not the only one. Let us remind each other, this pain is not the end. It is a door, and though it may slam shut behind us, the room it opens is sacred. So when you think of them, when you ache for what was and what will never be, try to see them not as a lost future, but as a passageway, not a promise, but a portal. They came to open you, and once opened, you cannot go back. Now you begin the truer work, not of reclaiming them, but of reclaiming yourself, of walking through the fire and realizing that every tear watered the ground where something new is growing, that the version of you who steps out of this will not just be older, but wiser, softer, braver, more whole. Because the door they opened was never about them. It was always about you, about who you are becoming now, that the path is clear, and even if you never speak again, even if your lives diverge forever, their presence was not in vain. They served their purpose. And that purpose was your becoming, so let the pain be your guide. Let it break you open. Let it strip away everything that is no longer aligned with the truth of who you are. And when you rise and you will don't forget, you are not here to stay the same. You are here to become. You are not meant to remain untouched. You are meant to be changed. By love, by loss, by doors that closed and never opened again, and most of all, by the self that walked through them. There comes a moment, often quietly and without warning, when the storm passes, when the silence that once screamed with absence begins to soften, when the tears no longer sting, and the name that used to ache in your chest becomes just a whisper. It doesn't mean the love is gone. It means something deeper has taken root. You begin to see clearly what you couldn't before, that the vividness, the aliveness, the sense of being more yourself than ever, it was never because of them. It was never about them holding the light. It was you, all along. The feelings they awakened, the parts of you that came alive in their presence, weren't created by their love. They were uncovered by it. They were yours. That passion, that clarity, that electric sense of purpose, it lived within you the entire time. They simply reflected it back. They reminded you what it feels like to be fully present, fully feeling, fully human. And now that you've seen it, you don't need to chase it. You are it. This is the shift, the beginning of rebirth, the transition from pain to power. You realize that while they may have stirred the fire, it's your fire now. You can nurture it. You can grow it. You can shape a life that is no longer defined by absence, but by presence your own. And this is where the true healing begins, not with forgetting them, not with finding someone new, but with returning home to yourself, with standing still long enough to feel the ground beneath your feet and saying, I am here, I am enough. At first, that feels impossible, because for so long, the grief was your companion, the longing was your compass. You defined yourself by what you lost, but in time, as the wound becomes a scar, you begin to remember what is still with you. Your voice, your truth, your capacity to feel deeply, to love without armor, to live with courage. You start to rebuild not in the image of the life you thought you would have with them, but in the truth of who you've become because of them. You start to say yes to things you once avoided. You find joy in solitude, not as a waiting room, but as a sanctuary. You surround yourself with people who don't just fill the silence, but honor it. And you begin to create a note from desperation. But from inspiration, you write, you move, you speak, you step forward. And with every step, you shed another layer of who you used to be. This is what it means to be reborn. Not to forget what came before, but to integrate it, to carry the memory, the lesson, the love not as a chain, but as a thread in the tapestry of your becoming. You realize you are not broken. You are breaking open, and the light that is pouring out was never theirs to give, it was always yours. When they left, they didn't take the magic with them. They left it behind. In you, they left a trail of breadcrumbs back to your soul. And now, you are the one holding the torch. You are the one walking forward. You are the one building a life that doesn't wait for someone else to arrive to make it meaningful. Because the truth is, you are already whole. You are not a half waiting to be completed. You are not unfinished without them. You are evolving, and every version of you is already worthy of love, especially your own. It's tempting to think that moving on is betrayal, that to stop aching is to stop caring. But healing is not forgetting. Healing is remembering yourself more than you remember the pain. It's choosing to root into your own existence. Even when the echoes of them still pass through your mind, you can carry them without carrying the weight. You can honor what was without needing it to be what is. You can love them still, and love yourself more, because this love, this depth of feeling, this soul-stirring foresight wasn't theirs. It was always yours. They were the mirror. You are the light. So let yourself resonate in spite of the loss. But because of it, let the grief become gratitude. Let the wound become wisdom. Let the silence become song. You don't need someone else to validate your aliveness. You've seen it. You've touched it. You've been it. And now, you can become it. There is power in this return. In standing on the other side of heartbreak and realizing you did not fall apart, you expanded. You deepened. You became more honest, more raw, more real. This is not the ending. This is the beginning of your most authentic self. So, say it out loud. Not for them, for you. I no longer need someone to hold the light for me, because now, I am the light. They were a chapter, not the whole book. This is the truth you come to in the stillness that follows the storm. After the fire has cooled, after the grief has softened into memory, after the echoes of their name no longer sting, but hum quietly in the background of your becoming. They were not the story. They were a sentence, a paragraph, a page that mattered. But they were never the ending. They were the pivot, the turning point, the place where everything began to shift. For a while, it's tempting to believe the story is over because they left, that the love that awakened so much should have continued to unfold, that there must have been more. But what if the more is you? What if they weren't meant to walk beside you into the next chapter? Because their only role was to hand you the pen? You were not abandoned. You were handed back to yourself, The ache you carried was real, the loss undeniable. But now, looking back with new eyes, you see that it wasn't just heartbreak. It was awakening. It wasn't just the end of something beautiful. It was the beginning of something sacred. They opened a door. You stepped through it. And now, you are standing in the space beyond wiser. Deeper. More alive than you've ever been. Not because they completed you, but because they revealed you. The love that didn't last was not a failure. It was a fire. And like all true fires, it left behind something essential, something stripped of illusion, something pure. This is the higher meaning behind the loss, not the fantasy of a future that never happened, but the truth of who you became when you were brave enough to feel fully and survive it. When you were cracked open wide enough to let the light in. When you stood in the wreckage and realized you were still breathing and that your breath was your own. And now, it's time to write what comes next. Not as someone broken, not as someone waiting, but as someone becoming. You are the author now. And this story, this life belongs to the person you fought so hard to reclaim. The one who rose from the ashes. The one who stayed when everyone else left. The one who looked into the mirror and chose to keep going. So write this next chapter with intention, with courage, with the kind of love that begins inside you and expands outward. Let it be messy. Let it be honest. Let it be yours. Because the love that changed you was never meant to contain you. It was meant to set you free. This is not the end of the road. It's the start of something more true, something more aligned, something that begins not in the arms of another, but in the quiet power of your own self-return. They showed you the way, but you are the one who must walk it now. So step forward, not in bitterness, not in regret, but in honor. What was, and even more, honor what it awakened in you. Let that be the legacy of this love, not longing, but liberation. And if these words find you in a place of ache, of memory, of mourning something unfinished, know this: you are not alone. So many of us carry stories like yours. So many of us have had to learn how to live again, not despite the loss, but because of what it revealed. So here is your invitation. Take everything they stirred in you, every tenderness, every ache, every truth, and let it guide your hand. Write the next chapter as the person you've become. And if this story spoke to you, if it echoed something buried in your own journey, leave a comment below. Tell your story, not because it needs fixing, but because it deserves to be heard. Your words might be the light someone else is waiting for, a reminder that healing is possible, that you are not the only one, that something meaningful came from the pain. And if you feel called to keep walking this path of growth, of awakening, of soul-level truth, subscribe. There are more stories to uncover, more shadows to face, more light to claim, because we don't heal alone. We heal together. And sometimes, the chapter you thought was the end is where your real story finally begins.